All right, Bob.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Spiritist study group, where we explore the teachings of Spiritism and delve into the first book by Joanna Angelis in her psychological series entitled The Currentness of Jesus. My name is Bob Williams from the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth. Tonight, I'm standing in for Fabricio, who can't be with us because he's in Thailand. He sends everyone his best wishes. I give a big thank you to Dan, who will be our speaker tonight. Our other speakers are not with us. I know that Sylvia Gibbons is unwell and cannot be with us, and we pray, Sylvia, that you feel better soon. Dr. Dan Assisi, our speaker tonight, is from the Spiritist Institute in the United States. He has a doctorate in education. He is an author and gives public talks on spirituality and spiritism in the United States and internationally. Our study group is a space for discussion and for reflection and spiritual growth, where we hope to deepen our understanding of Spiritism and its principles. So we hope you will all join together to study Joanna Angelis' teaching, and we invite everyone to share your thoughts and insights and your questions. In this session, we delve into chapter 7 of the book, The Currentness of Jesus, which is called Jesus and Justice. So to start our discussion, I invite Dan to open the debate. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you so very much, Bob. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today we have a slightly different format. As you can see, I am only one of four. Generally, we also have, uh, you know, Umberto, we have Anahi, and we have Sylvia, in addition to Fabricio, who tries to run away from the discussion every once in a while and just remain as a host. But we know better, and we try to drag him in because he also has wonderful content to offer, just like you. And so, because we have a reduced number of folks today, the good side to that is that we have more time to engage as a group in the questions that are raised by this lovely chapter, Jesus and Justice. So if you are up for it, I will do a very brief introduction in terms of how I see the chapter, and then we can get our hands dirty by digging into what's in here. Because as usual, Joanna de Angelis, the great spiritual mentor, gives us a lot in very little. In just a couple of pages, there's so many different concepts in there. And I am sure that if we were to and wanted to, we could spend a couple of weeks, if not months, debating this little chapter here with additional resources and additional insight. Um, so let me just start by saying how I saw this chapter, right? So this lovely chapter entitled Jesus and Justice really is, in my mind, divided into three. And you can see her different sections there. Every time she has a little new section, she has a little asterisk there. And so you can see how her structure and her thinking process goes. The first one, the first section, in my view, is really about what justice is and what is our concept of justice. The second one, it really is the development of Jesus as an example, and how is it that we can see Jesus as an example of justice. And in a very logical and straightforward way, what you see in the third section is how we can benefit from the idea of justice and how we can get closer to becoming the example which Jesus brought forth to us. So, in a very structured manner, she tells us about the concept of justice. She gives us a great example in part two of Jesus as the best bearer for what justice is. And then she gives us some advice and some insights and some considerations as to how we can bring that into our lives, which I think is a very didactic way of looking at the topic. And it's a really big topic. It is justice after all. And justice is a complex thing. And why is that? I think that because when we read the first part and she explained to us what the concept of justice is, according to her understanding, we already may have a little bit of an experience of trying to equate and conciliate in our own minds what our concept of justice is and what concept of justice is in our society. And so she begins by saying that justice aims to repair the damage that has been done and rehabilitate the offender, making them a useful member of society. So I think it's a very powerful and simple idea how she divides that into two components for justice. One of them is to repair the damage that has been done, but the other one is to rehabilitate the offender. So there are two very important components which lead us to start questioning ourselves. How often do we see that in our society where we equate the idea of justice with revenge? And that those are two very different things. Okay? So there is a rehabilitation process in justice that oftentimes goes forgotten or unnoticed in our own conception of justice. When we witness an atrocious act or an unjust act, we often call for the punishment of the perpetrator, which is understandable, but we seldom think about how to rehabilitate those who have incurred in that act. And that is already very interesting, isn't it? Um, and then she also continues to develop on the rehabilitation piece by saying in the second paragraph, you can see how she has really an educative or education minded perspective when she says that justice favors education by using disciplinary methods, including limiting the wrongdoer's freedom, preventing somebody from having freedom to incur in order to spare them, she goes on, and the community from more serious harm. So first, we stop the offending behavior and we prevent it from doing more harm. And then after that, we rehabilitate. She goes on to talk a little bit more about. There's a paragraph here that I think tells us a lot about our day to day. She says, when justice becomes corrupted, humans become delirious, and the abuse of authority leads to the extremes of nonsense. And so we begin to be able to make an analysis of the world that we live in. And I think most of us may arrive at the idea that our sense of justice today has a lot to do with preventing further damage or harm, but not as much to the rehabilitation of those who are in the wrong. So that already raises a little bit of a flag for us, in my view. Um, and she goes, she goes a little bit into the history of law for us in the human world, which I think is a really beautiful piece. She says that in the beginning there was the law of the strongest. Later, it was replaced by the absurd condition of heredity. So she's really talking about that tribal mind and that inheritance of power, the divine right of kings, where it was passed from father to son power, right? Eventually, by the more advanced social democratic principles, which is sort of like the phase that we find ourselves in, where we think there's a social component to justice and there's a democracy where people together can decide on what the laws are and when to find the representatives and so forth. But she also calls out that there's still a long way to go until humankind develops respect for life, for other people, for nature, and for justice, free from arbitrary punishment. So I love how she begins to tell us here, at least hint very directly, that no human law really will be able to fulfill this next level, which is individual respect for each other. Because our human laws, they are set in such a way as to prevent harm, but they don't necessarily, in my view, help us develop the respect for each other and for nature. That is an individual quest, and we all have to figure that piece out. How can we do that? It's a question that comes to mind. What kind of example can we have of how to actually act in a way that is not just about not creating harm to other creatures, but to live nobly? This is a question that has enthralled philosophers through the ages. We see Socrates and Plato talking about justice early on with the Greeks, and of course, many others. So the concept of what is justice has been there for a while. And I love that she starts the second piece of this chapter by saying, justice, Jesus became a champion of equitable justice. So she gives us an example. He says that his attitude towards people was always the same, one of benevolence which aimed to educate. So she talks to us a little bit earlier about the idea of opportunity, of making sure that everybody has the same opportunity for growth. And I think it's a very laudable thing that we should pull out, right? She continues that Jesus provided everyone with the same conditions and opportunities, never favoring anyone. He always granted the same treatment, whether they were adulteresses, or the seller of fantasies, or priests who questioned him, or the skillful Sadducees, or the hypocritical Pharisees. So, and this is a really powerful thing. And we can see here the modeling of what justice is, to be just, to be encompassing, to be accepting of everyone like Jesus was, who did not favor one person over the other. And how hard it is to do that. And how hard it is to do that in our daily lives, I start to think. Because we generally favor people over others. It's natural based on where we are, based on the relationships that we have, based on the experiences we have lived, the prejudices we have built over time. We treat people differently, whether we know them or we don't know them. And Jesus gave everybody the same opportunity. And I'm not quite sure that I do. So that's an interesting topic there in terms of justice of opportunity. And why is that? Because she also recognized there's different talents and abilities with incarnation and reincarnations. We know that, right? And so it's a really interesting line for me how she connects the idea of justice. She brings it to Jesus, and then she really brings it home for us when she begins to give us a little bit of advice on the third part. And then I will make a couple comments, and then we can kind of dive into our discussion, right? She begins the third part in a very different voice. She is generally very conceptual in the first and second. She's explaining things. But in the third part, she is speaking directly at us. She says, if you're entangled by your own mistakes and find yourself floundering in the web of rough human justice, re educate yourself. If you were the victim, if you have been wronged, and so forth. She is speaking directly to the reader. She's speaking to each one of us. And she says, pay now what you forgot to settle yesterday. So it seems like a change of voice, a change of topic almost, because she's been talking about opportunity and justice and treatment. And then she's telling us that, hold on a second, if you feel that you've been entangled, if you feel that you're wronged, right? Pay now what you forgot to settle yesterday. So she's also bringing in all that we know about reincarnation and the immortality of the spirit, and she's applying it directly to us. And she's saying, the reason why you may be facing circumstances that feel unjust to you is because there are consequences from the past that were not settled, and you need to settle because this is an educative process. We are in the process of educating ourselves. And so understand that the challenges we face today are of an educative nature. And so I thought that was really interesting. And so she addresses the injustices we feel, and she also invites us to be just with others. And she goes, on your part, be just and equitable with everybody, taking Jesus, who never refused to do his part, as your model of behavior. Because at the end of the day, if she's truly interested in educating souls and helping us educate ourselves, then she's saying we must recover the choices that we did in the past that were not perhaps as great. But the best way to prevent new challenges for the future is to re-educate ourselves and give everybody the opportunity to be equitable and act like Jesus did. So there is a, hey, we need to figure out the things that we've done in the past and fix them through our actions, through these new actions, right? And we need to not incur in future debts by becoming more equitable, more like Jesus. And so this concept of justice is a fascinating one because there's so many different beautiful pieces in here. She talks about so many different concepts that I'm curious about what is it that you feel stood out for you, or what is it that you feel is interesting and important for us to highlight about this chapter?
Can I start? I'll go ahead and comment. Is that okay?
That is
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you.
I will answer your question. For me, what really stood out was how she linked justice with education, right? So Kardec also talks a lot about education with us throughout the Spirit's book. So, and linking it to the Spirit's book, justice comes there as the love, justice, love, and charity. So that also stood out for me, because when she gives Jesus as an example, she's giving the example of justice, love, and charity. And how do we do that? How do we learn to to like Jesus, to act as our model through education? So that really stood out for me.
Yeah, I love it. At the end of the day, isn't it interesting how she shifts the conversation to education? And I think it's wonderful for us to make a big, before you jump in, Ian, and before you jump in, Scylla, it's interesting too to make maybe a delineation between education, what we think it is, and what it might be, right? Because for many of us, we have taken the idea of, oh, an education as something that is school based, right? Oh, we go to school, we get educated. But there is education in a more ample sense, right? There is instruction that you receive at school, but there's education that goes beyond just the cognitive and intellectual learning. There is the education of understanding the world, being respectful of others, of living in a group, all those things that our modern perspective sometimes have failed to consider or forgot along the way, right? One can get instructed without necessarily being educated, right? And if we take the Greek word educare, which means to pull from within, it has a lot to do with values, priorities, and an understanding of the world, which for me at least has been sort of lost in our modern understanding of education, which is how many years of schooling have you done? What kind of degree have you achieved? What experiences professionally will that open the door to? Those are also very important. But we are talking about a deeper sense of education. And to add that spiritist layer on top of it, we who recognize the existence of the immortal spirit and the fact that it comes back many times through reincarnation, there is a spiritual component of education that carries on from life to life and how we treat others and so forth. So, our perception of education here in this text, within this context, with her, is way broader than just schooling, right? So, I love that you bring that, Andrea, and I just want to make sure that we pop that in there for folks to think and react to. Ian, what do you have?
Oh well, hello everybody. My ideas is I'm going to play a bit of the devil's advocate here. Okay, so I mean, Jesus teaches justice in a way that is very, very difficult for us to sometimes to understand and definitely to carry out. If we take the beautiful lesson of Jesus and the adulteress, we can see how I don't think any of us would have ever managed to do what he did in that situation. When I read the first part, the first paragraph there, I see that she puts not a very strong way, because if I look at the things like she speaks about the strong and the weak and the health and the infirm and the young and the old. I mean, if in reality, of course, the weak can very often help the strong. The infirm have got so many lessons to teach the healthy, and the old, of course, have got an enormous amount of lessons to teach the young. I think, as Dan put it, education is very important in terms of coming from the home, your peers, and of course all experiences in life. to me, when I look at how justice has come through the ages, when you think before Talion, there was no real justice. It was really just whoever was stronger would get whatever he wanted. Talion's law was the first thing to bring out some kind of level playing field, although not very level, to be honest, but a level playing field in that you had an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and these kinds of things. So, I mean, in that and all of the changes that have happened through the Greek and Roman times and on through our own time, person has been hereditary. I mean, the Romans, for example, they weren't very interested in hereditary as we think of kings and queens, because they would just put maybe the person would be a relative, but he would have to be the strongest individual to be able to carry on, as was seen at that time. I think that if we look at how justice comes through and we understand that we are always in evolution, it is impossible for us to have an idea whereas everybody has an equal. If everybody is not equal, we have. I mean, she speaks about everybody having the same amount of money and whatever, but we are just not able to do that. We are not anywhere near a level of understanding or evolution to be able to do that. I believe, unfortunately, and I think we should always remember Jesus saying, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's."
Thank you, Ian. I see your point, and I first thought about that as well when I read that. I think that you're talking about paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Fourth paragraph of the book, where she says, "In a just society, everyone enjoys equal opportunities for progress due to an identical distribution of wealth," right? And so I thought that's a very interesting topic, and we can discuss this for very long. But I want to focus on the way she worded this, which is everyone enjoys equal opportunity for progress. And then she says, due to an identical distribution of wealth. That is to say, if we all have the resources that we need, then we'll have opportunities for developing ourselves. I didn't necessarily read, Ian, that everybody had to have the same material wellness, that they just had to have enough or fair distribution so that they could focus on their own development. But your point is well taken. I just want to point that out. It's a
I
slightly
only
different
wanted
thing.
really, sorry about that. I only wanted really to say that, in our society, the way it is structured, and I mean, most of you live in a first world society. I don't. And I mean, the inequalities and everything make vast. I mean, a lot of you have Brazilian ties anyway, but the inequalities give, I mean, so vast differences between people. It's very, very difficult. And of course, I mean, I think as spiritists, we have to understand that everybody needs what they're getting. And I mean, the whole idea of what she says at the end, I think, is very important in terms of what we need to understand, but what we need to sacrifice. All of this idea of sacrifice that we can see through the Gospels is very well tied into what we understand of the difficulties that we go through, and how that we really need to understand that these are challenges and not punishments.
Mm-hmm.
So even in that kind of context, I mean, if you here, as you probably mostly know, the idea of recovering an individual who has gone into crime is zero. In the UK, from where I am from, it's not zero. I mean, I can remember even when I lived there of people who were hideous criminals who were actually recovered. So yes, and we have different, very, very different spheres, I guess.
Oh, for sure. And I want to pose Sila here in a little bit. But I think that this is a wonderful topic because she says in a just society. And
Yes. Oh, yes, 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 yes. We
we're
need to
clearly
strive to
not in a
that.
just society. But I will caution Ian. I would caution the very pragmatic part of you, which I love, by the way, because I also am very pragmatic in that sense, to remind you, like, there's a slippery slope argument there, which is, well, everybody has what they're supposed to face. If we truly agree to that, I think we all do, because we believe in the justice of God, there is the danger of saying, therefore, I should not really need to help anybody because they have what they need. And I think that that is a difficult and perilous argument to make because it moves us away from charity. And I think that that's
I
what Jesus came to exemplify. So, yes, the world is very different depending on where you are. And yes, there's tons of injustice. Yes. And it might be that in some places, opportunities are less than others. Very much yes to that. Right. And our role in it all is to be more like Jesus, who did not need to come to help us, but nevertheless did. He had no need to come back to this planet. He has past this evolutionary stage, yet out of love and out of duty and honor, we can explore those topics from different pieces, decided that his role was to come back and help us lift ourselves from that moment. So while we cannot be Jesus yet, I feel the calling in a small, very small way to be more like Jesus, to help people in their challenges to the extent that I can in the circumstances that I can. So I hear you and I agree with you, Ian, but I will disagree with you a little bit on let's not just get so jaded by the world that we think that there is no hope for some people or certain circumstances or some countries or some cities. Let's be that change, right? Let's think with immortal spirit. And I know that I say that to myself too, because oftentimes when I'm out there in the world driving my car and somebody cuts me off, that's not the thinking that comes to my mind, right?
No, I completely agree with you, Dan. But I'm still here.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, you are, you
you know
are.
what I mean.
And I am so grateful that you're
But
there because you're bringing different perspectives.
no, but I completely agree with everything you said, and of course you can't be a spiritist really if you don't try to be as Jesus and treat your brother as you would have him treat you. So I mean, yes, I completely agree with you. Yes.
So yeah, so I love that you brought that very pragmatic piece, but like don't let that part of your heart die just yet, yet. Hold on to it. There's hope. There is
It's
hope.
not, Dan. It's not. I was being the devil advocate.
I love
That's
it.
all.
I love it. And you should do that every single time, right? Especially because if we think about this, and sometimes I tell people, if we were to play in the, the lottery game of reincarnation, as I call it, and we have 8 billion people in the world, like all things being equal, and if we for a second forget this idea of uh, groups working together and progressing, souls progressing together, if we were to be born again, right, you would have a 1 in 3 chance of being born in either China or India for sheer population sizes, right? So the circumstances that we face today are certainly not the ones we'll be faced tomorrow. I calculated the chances, for instance, of me being reborn where I live today, which is San Diego, and it's something like 0.005%, given the population of San Diego. So if we think that and we understand the spiritual reality, then it sort of nudges us a little bit to think more about others, not just our neighbor next to us, but our neighbor in the world in general, and say, what is it that I can do to help difficult situations in a different part of the world? I can act locally, but I can have an impact globally. And I wonder if the universal family concept that is so often brought to us through spiritist thinking is a nudge in that direction as well, right? So it's interesting to see like we are connected. Today I might be here, Ian. Tomorrow you might be in my seat, and I might be in your city, right? And so it's a fascinating thing. But without much ado, Sila, tell us a little bit. What's on your mind?
All right, I'm gonna try to be concise. I had an experience in my life that pretty much encapsulate everything that was said, and I would just want to share with you guys. It's one of the times I think I did right. So a long time ago, I used to live in California, and I used to have a very, very good boss, in my opinion, the best boss I ever have. She was fair. She was, let us do our jobs, and I just have her an example. So when I moved here in the UK, not when I moved, but I started a company. It was a cleaning company, and got to the point that I have 12 employees. And at this point, I just wanna be led by example. I just want to do like my older boss did. I try to be fair. I try to be compassionate with all my girls that work for me and treat everybody really, really well. And the company was really doing well until I find out that half of my girls was planning into steal my clients, poach my clients, and let me, like dangling there. And the other half was like, Sila, I'm sorry, I want to tell you because you're such a good person. I say no problem. So I thought about, and I didn't let get into me. I didn't let me feel hate or anything towards those girls. I try to be smart about, but at the same time not feel bad feelings. So I I called the girls, the three ones that were mainly trying to do this behind my back, and I just say, look, I'm closing the company. So make me a list of all the clients you want, and I will give them to you. So sure enough, they made a list with the biggest clients, the ones that, and I gave to them. And I gave also, I didn't want to work in this situation. And something in my heart told me, just get rid, you start a company, you can start another one. It's not a big deal. It's a cleaning job. It's nothing. You can start again from Hoover and cloths, cleaning. So basically, I gave all the clients, I just kept the companies that were clean at nighttime. And I told also the other girls that were being nice to me, I say, look, take these clients and go. And people told me how stupid I was to just give away a business, basically. But I thought I was smart and somehow I felt good in my heart. In the end of the day, for all this, I cut contact with those girls. Obviously, I don't want them in my life, but three other companies came out of there. They fought, they did whatever, but they have three other companies. And I heard that they're hiring people and they are doing actually really well because they're following the example I gave them as a boss. So whatever my boss taught me, which is the education part, I was able to pass on to them. And I feel really proud of that. I know it sounds silly, but I feel really proud that they are treating the other girls they hire and they're successful, even though they start wrong on the wrong path trying to steal clients. Now they have their business, they're bringing money to their families, they're doing well, and they're treating the other people with respect. And I mean, I'm not like, oh, look at me, I'm perfect, but I taught them something that's good and pass on. And now I have my business, my other business, and I'm fine. So whatever you need, God will give to you if you trust. Will come back to you. You don't need to, be, how can I say, pickling in little things. And, I know sounds silly, but that was one of the times I think I did the right thing. So yeah, that's it.
I love that. Our experiences are never silly. Don't say that, right? Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing a little bit of you and your experiences. And I think it has a lot to do with opportunities, right? So, so here in the text, we see this whole idea of, again, everyone enjoys equal opportunities for progress, right? So it's not about achievement, it's about opportunity. Because she could have easily have said, in a just society, everybody enjoys the same wealth. That's not what she said, right? Because her concept is that of education, which is the point that she's been making since the beginning, that justice is education and rehabilitation and growth. So I think it's a really interesting thing for us to think about sometimes what people don't say is as equally important as what is it that they do say. So it's a great point, right? We are in this education journey. spiritual education, emotional education, intellectual education, social education. We're growing in many different ways. I love that she's calling us to it. And I love that your example highlights that we can help people educate themselves even when we are not aware. Right? Lindalva, you have something to add, I think.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I I was um I was just reflecting about these beautiful words of Joanna, and when she talks about education, and to me, education comes about as us being educated about the values that Jesus brought us. Because we often talk about education as the education we get where we learn to do something, we learn a skill, we go to school to learn, we go to university to learn, or whatever. But here it is talking about the education of the values. And I do understand that we don't live in a perfect world, as she's talking about here, but we need to aim to get to this more perfect world, to a better world. And in order for us to do that, we need to start thinking about these values that Jesus brought us and that Joanna is calling us all the time, reminding ourselves of them. Because otherwise, how are we going to move on from being the imperfect spirits that we are today, just seeing the injustices around us and seeing how things are, oh, they are not good, but what are we doing to get things better, to make things better? How are we acting? And I work with children, and I have been thinking a lot about these in my last job. I work with children with additional needs, and I often sort of paid attention at how those children are like seen in the in especially in schools where it's not like schools just for children with additional needs. So there is especially a case that I thought it was the most beautiful thing I have seen. Um, we had a blind child at school, and she had a group of friends, girls, and those girls every single day they would give their time, their play time. They were with their blind friend. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing. And I could see that they had been friends. They were friends from other lives. And because you could see the connection between them was so beautiful. But other people looked at it and they thought, oh, they should be doing, they're wasting their time. They should be playing. They should be interacting with the other children, like, with the same abilities that they have and things like that. And I was there wishing that there were more children with different abilities interacting with the children who hadn't had all those abilities, because this is how we learn. When she asks us, when she talks about that in a more perfect world, the strong is going to look after the weak, the young is gonna look after the old. How are we going to learn to do that if we don't see that in practice happening in our daily lives wherever we are? And also, I know in the more materialistic societies, it's very hard when you sort of want um, to care, because people are not. I am having a personal experience at the moment. My mother-in-law is an 86-year-old woman, lady. She's living on her own. And lately she's been having falls, and I am really, really like feeling really bad about going up to her house and seeing her full of bruises, and not being able to sort of bring her home. Because when I say to her, you need to come and live with us, and so that we can look after you, she feels bad about that. She doesn't want, she says, I don't want to be a burden. So because I know that we are strong, she is the person who needs care now. But because in the society, in the materialistic society, that is saying, oh, that is a burden, I'm going to be a burden on you, I don't want to do that. And I think this is the type of education as well that we need to teach, to learn from each other, is that our parents, they look after us when we are little, and then they get old. It's our time to sort of to look after them, to bring them close to us, because we know they are like getting to the end of their lives. Why should we sort of say, oh, my profession, my this, my that, my life is more important? So I think this is the education, Joanna. This education Joanna is talking about here, as in a more perfect world, in a more advanced world, we need to start it here, because we know if we don't start with what we already know, when is it going to, who is going to start doing it? And so I think this has like stroked me a lot of a lot of a lot of feelings that I have been like experiencing for a while. And this is really, really beautiful what Joanna is talking about here. And I also wanted to mention about Emmanuel, when he was the book 2000 years ago, he was powerful. He was using his power in the wrong way. And on his other book, 50 years later, he was a slave. So I think reincarnation always have this beauty that we should treat others with equality, because we are not always going to be who we are today. Life changes in a second, and so we need to be aware of that it does, and not just for people around us. It could be with us tomorrow as well.
Thank you for sharing, Lindalva. And Bob, what is your perspective?
I think, as you've probably already mentioned, the study seems to have a national or international sort of context of what is justice at a sort of corporate national level, and also what we personally do to harvest justice for ourselves and other people. I think at the national, international level, the world is a fairly sick place at present in terms of justice. Within the United Kingdom, we see people rioting outside the lodgings of displaced people. Asylum seekers are now in fear of their lives because of the hostels where they've been placed by the government are now being attacked by the local public. That is a terrible injustice to people who are weak and in need of care and love. There is, I won't comment too much about the United States, but we see what the American government is doing in relation to sending people to distant places, even though they haven't had their time in court, purely because of their national identity or their immigration credentials. The study talks in terms of what is a just society. The strong support the weak, the healthy aid the sick. We've heard tonight from our contributors how the healthy are helping the sick, the young are helping the old. And I think at an individual level, we all have that responsibility. But in terms of justice, when we are wronged, it's very, very difficult not to turn off that tap which says revenge, not to turn off that tap which says hatred. Very difficult to love your enemy in that context. And Joanna beautifully says here that if we have suffered an injustice, we should be patient and wait. That's a very difficult thing to do. It's often the case that those who do us wrong do not have any of the qualities that Joanna is praising. So it's going to be a very long wait if we're going to get reparation from them. But we must be patient, and we must, I suppose, put up with it in a way. In our own lives, we must be just to other people. I'm not so sure we can always expect justice from other people. And I'm not always sure that we can expect justice from the governments that we elect or that put in place over us.
Thank you, Bob. I think that is a wonderful perspective for us to do that. And I think that I would then take that further and say, what is that we can do? Right? Because we recognize whatever it is that we look, that there is injustice in the world. I think we have wonderful examples, as Bob just called out, that everybody else shared different things. And I think that if we go back to this idea that in a just society, everyone enjoys equal opportunities for progress, as Joanna said, then it is fair to say that in an unjust society, not everybody enjoys equal opportunity for progress. So, can we be those who provide that opportunity for progress for others and for ourselves that might not be present? Like one example, for instance, as we were hearing Lindal was sharing about the kids and the blind kids, right? The kid with the visual challenge was aided by other kids. So in that sense, they provided an opportunity for mingling, for social interaction, for joy that was not present. They were able to create that missing opportunity that society is not able yet to provide to that individual. So, can we do the same? Can we look upon our own lives and say, what opportunities for growth do I need? Can I see them? Can I recognize them? Maybe I already do, right? Maybe the lack of opportunities for growth is an opportunity for growth. As in, you understand why that is. But can you identify what opportunities for growth you would like that you're missing? And more importantly, can you also identify opportunities for growth for other people around you that they may not have, that maybe you can help somehow? Because if we do, then we are taking a step towards that juster society, the more just society. Does that make sense? So, our call to action is yes, to bear the injustices because we now understand why they happen, to be patient, and to endeavor to not commit them, and to repair the injustices that we see present. If justice right in the beginning is about stopping further harm and then rehabilitating, then what is it that we can do to stop harm and rehabilitate? I think that is a wonderful question that all of us can ask ourselves in the world. Are there small things that I can do that can help stop some of the injustice of the world and rehabilitate the world by providing opportunities for other people? Maybe it's as simple as a smile. Maybe it's as simple as a conversation. Maybe it's a sharing of experiences. Maybe it's offering an opportunity for work. Maybe is fill in the blank. I think it's a powerful question that we can ask ourselves. We have just a couple of more minutes, but we still have two people here that have more insight. So let's welcome them. Ian, tell us what's on your mind. You're on mute, my friend.
Yes, I am. No, I completely agree with you. And I think it's very much the way that we look at things, the way we perceive things, which because of our education isn't always the best. I think, as I said earlier on, the lessons that we see in the Gospels are exactly that, that we need to be able to understand why we have to go through things that we don't like, why we have injustices against us, and can't seem to quickly be, or in a quick method, be able to see to be given our just rewards because of what we went through. And everything culminates, of course, on the cross, because when we see how Jesus gave up everything I mean, he stood in front of Pontius Pilate and said nothing, basically. He was completely, he gave everything in the way that he showed his humility, the way that he showed that he would carry out exactly the word of God, the way that he was able to try and make us understand that we all have to go through bad things, and that's just part of our. In fact, we should be glad of it because it's part of our growth. So, I mean, I think that's really, if we can see things like that, I think then that when we actually go through these times, they are much easier. Of course, we have our own egos there, and it doesn't make it always the way that we would like. But that's my idea anyway.
And that is wonderful. And that's part of what we're here to do, right? If we can remember that we are immortal spirits going through challenges, learning in this education process, maybe the challenges of life will become easier. Are they going to disappear? No, but they will become easier to bear. Our cross will become lighter. I think it's one big takeaway from the whole Jesus thing, right? Andrea or Andrea, you tell me, how do I say your name correctly?
You can say it however you like it.
Whichever way you prefer.
Andrea is like, I mean, Andrea is my name in Portuguese, right? But Andrea is how people usually who speaks English call my name, so it doesn't really matter. So as you were talking about how can we then incorporate this thought to our lives or into our lives, I was thinking about Emmanuel when he says that the family is the first school of the soul, of the spirit. So we sometimes think that we should go out to help people, right? But when we learn to really appreciate our families and understand that educating the souls that are given to us or how can I say that, that we are presented with, right, in our families, when we educate our children properly, in the sense that we're talking about, right? Education in that sense of giving them the right values, really showing as an example, because that's very hard. As a mom of 3, it's very hard to look at your child, see and really see them, really understand who they are, and help them to flourish and to develop their own values. That is very hard because usually we want to impose on them, right? So if we learn how to take really good care of our family, of those around us, we are already preparing the basis of our society, because that child will go outside, she will act out what she learned or what he learned in their families. So I am a strong believer that we really have to take care of our family in order to have a more just society, in order to really incorporate this feeling of justice. And when we see someone that acts in a violent way or in a aggressive
In a way
way,
that is not conducive to justice. Yeah.
exactly, it's maybe because he never learned how to do otherwise. So I came up with a case that was really interesting, just to finish with my line of thought. A man who killed his wife and his partner. She was his partner and the mother of his child. So he killed her. And her mom, that's a real example, right? It's a real life example. Her mom, when he went to prison, he is somewhere in America, and the mother of the victim started writing him letters because she wasn't allowed to visit him. The justice, the legal justice, and where they were, didn't allow her, as the mother of the victim, to visit him. So she started writing letters to him, and she forgave him. And then, when she forgave him, he felt real love from that woman. And he said, on his own words, that he thought that love was rough because that's how he learned from his own family, right? He was beat up all the time. He had a very aggressive stepfather, and the stepfather would beat him up and tell him that it was out of love. So he learned that love was rough, was aggressive. So he killed his wife, thinking, of course, it's a sick thought, but I mean, it was the way that he was expressing what he learned. And that woman, when she opened up for him as a real human being, as a real brother, right? She taught him what real love is. And so he is, to this day, because he's alive and she's alive as well, he is grateful to her for showing him what real love is. So I think that's a great example, a very hard one for a mother, but again,
Yeah.
when we are able to,
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that.
yeah.
And I think that speaks to the idea of justice that Joanna brings forth in the first paragraph, right? So there is a concept of justice of stopping further harm. The justice system did that. But the rehabilitation came from the opportunity that she gave him through those interactions, right? Again, is what kind of opportunities are we there to, do we have to rehabilitate others? And ourselves. What opportunities do we need to rehabilitate ourselves from the actions that we think are not noble? And what are some of the other things that we can provide for other people who may need them? And remember from our previous study, when we talked about honor, Joanna sort of defined honor as the courage to do what is best, right? So, can we be in our noble honor and figure out what we need most and what is the most right thing to do? And can we find opportunities to do it, right? So, I think it's a wonderful invitation for us to think about justice as we arrive at the end of our time together. But I would love, if you're open for it, we can just go around really quickly and say really briefly, maybe in a couple of words, maybe a sentence top, what is one thing that you take away from this chapter that you think might be useful for you in your journey as a developing spirit person, human? Take a second to think about this. And if you're open for it, we can share. If you're not wanting to share, that's okay too. Right? I can start. Oh, go ahead, Bob. You wanted to start?
Justice
Oh, you're
belongs.
on. Okay, go ahead. I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay, I've lost you. Revenge isn't for me to deliver. I must be patient for justice to be done in any situation where I feel I've done wrong. That isn't the way I've conducted my life up until now. Even if I've not taken action against someone, the bitterness in my heart has been very vengeful, and I must let go of that.
Thank you for that, Bob. Scylla.
I think we have to have courage to do what we have to do, even if everybody else is not doing what should be done.
Thank you.
I think to me, I have highlighted two words, which is compassion and humility. I think humility helps me to see my brothers and sisters just like myself, like Jesus saw me, as sees me, like Jesus sees me, an imperfect spirit, but he knows I am created to be perfect. And I think compassion leads me to, when I am ready to judge others for whatever reason, compassion will stop me, because I will also realize that today, as the example Andrea has just given, you know, today somebody or myself may act in a certain way because I am not certain of how to do things differently. So compassion is always an opportunity to look at the other like being myself, seeing myself in the other.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ian?
Yes, as somebody else said, I can't quite remember who. I think the little things are definitely important. I think, as Andrea said, the family and the people who are nearest you are extremely important, because they're not our family or near us for any other reason but to help us on our way. So, I mean, I think sometimes we don't give enough time, we don't give enough thought to exactly what goes wrong. And we certainly should be, as Bob was saying, far more patient, far more understanding, and trying to do things without being impetuous.
Thank you, Ian. Roger, did you raise your hand too, or was it just my impression?
Yeah, I'm going to read from the book. And it was just a very short paragraph that really hit home for me. And it simply said, he proposed that our justice should not be the justice of Pharisees, who were morally sick and who flayed the weak, exploited widows and children, taking advantage of the situation. And that really hit home. And that, out of context, it doesn't sound so much, but when you read that in the context of what is around it, the words around it,
Thank you.
Whole chunk has a great deal of meaning.
It sure does. Thank you for that, Roger. And I can share that for myself too. I think what strikes me is I know the world is unjust, and sometimes I struggle where to begin. But the lens that this chapter gave me is that I can maybe focus on seeing if I can help provide opportunities for other people. What kind of opportunities, small opportunities, may I provide? And as we're coming here to the end of our time together, I'm glad to stay a little bit longer, but I just want to thank you for taking the step into the breach and being part of our study. I really appreciate all your contributions. Thank you so much for taking your time, for joining us in this journey. It is way better when we are in it together. There's so many different perspectives that we may not have when we don't have other people to offer them to us. It's wonderful to see different insights, different perspectives. It is really great. And so I'll pass it over to Bob. Bob, as our official host for the night, is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
Not in particular. You've given a very good summary, as other people have. I wish, again, to thank you all for coming, and I look forward to joining you on our next talk, if we can remember what the subject will be.
Maybe we'll get it right. I think it's August 27, if we haven't changed that. But it should be the next chapter, and the next chapter is finally going to be Jesus and Duty.
Jesus and Duty. That was the one that I prepared for this evening.
Or this evening. Thank you, everyone. It was great having you. And again, if you have questions or comments you want to offer in the WhatsApp group, feel free to do that.
Bye, everybody. Have a good
Bye.
weekend.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Good week.
God bless you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, friends.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.